Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and Chris Whitman, and you can find out words.
Cut.
From the second top.
How much scotch did you put in your drink?
Your hosts are Steve Becker and Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started...
Sorry.
Yes, we need a jingle. But we also need a disclaimer because we talk about...
Hey, wait a minute. We've got a musician on the phone.
There you go.
Yeah. You do a jingle for us now?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking something like what was that carpet place? You know,
1-800-EMPIRE.
There you go. Something as iconic as that.
It's a Chicago thing, although I think they're not worldwide, but they're national now. But growing up in Chicago, there was 1-800-EMPIRE. Anyway.
Today.
Way off topic.
Yeah, right.
Where were we?
Disclaimer. So, this is the trigger warning disclaimer. We're going to be talking about messed up stuff, called by another adjective momentarily, but it could involve anything from murder, rape, suicide, child abuse. We're going to be talking about horror culture and messed up stuff. So, if that's not your cup of tea, go listen to something else.
Get out now.
Or not. And listen to us talk about fucked up shit.
Like that.
Coming up in the near future, we are going to be talking to actress Rebecca Reinhardt, best known for The Embalmers, Fright Vision, and Sister Krampus. Different angle. I like it. As well as Kathy Koja, author known for The Cipher, Strange Angels, and Buddha Boy. More interesting titles. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But today we have the company of Andy Deane, musician and author, best known for The Rain Within and novel works such as All the Darkness in the World, The Sticks, and No Turning Back. Welcome, Andy.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing quite well.
Before we get into the meat of the interview, anything you want to pitch about what you're currently working on?
I guess the latest thing for me is in October, my latest album from The Rain Within came out, and it is called Horror Show. One word.
Fitting title.
Yeah, there you go. I come prepared, you know.
We'll put together a bio for you on the Horror Makes Us Happy page and link to that and or whatever else you want. So we can talk about that offline. But as far as the interview goes, it's less about your professional work and more about you as a fan of horror stuff. We approach this in three different aspects. We talk about your childhood, your teenage years, and adulthood, because sometimes that triggers memories that you'd forgotten. But that said, it's not meant to be a therapy session, so anything that you don't want to answer, just say pass and we'll move on. But starting with childhood, what were some of your earliest memories of scary things?
So I guess the first horror movie I remember seeing really young was Phantasm. And I saw it at the drive-in with my uncle and my cousin and was just absolutely fascinated and confused.
That's a good one to start with. Yeah.
It didn't necessarily make any sense to me, but it scared the crap out of me, and I was just left wanting more. And you know, I was around people that I loved, people I cared about, and I experienced that a lot growing up with horror, where my parents they're pretty awesome, pretty great people, and they were very open to letting me figure out life for myself as far as what I wanted and, you know, what I loved. And they didn't turn away they said I had a love of horror films from like as young as they could remember. And they didn't necessarily get it, but, you know, they made sure they were there to explain things and to separate fiction from reality and stuff like that. But they also didn't like discourage it. And I think because I had, you know, a solid family background, this sort of vicarious fear and uncertainty that I got through the movies was fascinating to me. I have a story from when my dad took me to a local haunted house, you know, one of those things they throw every Halloween, and it was here in Charlottesville, a little town, and I was so little that my dad's like carrying me through here, and I am loving it, like just loving it. But toward the end of it, the Wolfman reached out, and like I said, my dad's carrying me, he's holding me. Wolfman touches my shoulder, and I just piss all over my dad, like piss, just covered his chest in piss, and was just terrified. And then we got outside, and when we got outside, I started crying because I wanted to go back in. So I was very upset that I couldn't do this again immediately. My dad's like, hey, we'll come back tomorrow. I'd like a different shirt, but
right.
So that happened. And
that's gotta be an interesting reaction for your dad too. Like you expect the kid's crying because he's scared, and you're like, no, it's okay, buddy. It's just fake. And you're like, no, I want to go back. That was awesome.
that was how that went down. Yeah. And but
nice.
So we'll kick things off with a pee story. See where we go from here.
Wouldn't be the first time. On the Phantasm thing, though, I'm curious. Had you seen Phantasm and then Star Wars? And if so, did you find the Jaw was very confusing?
They are kind of the same. I hadn't considered that. I don't know which order I saw them in. I would guess that it would be around the same-ish time, but it's all a blur to me. I don't know.
Yeah. I just always saw that connection. It's like, what are these Jawas doing in a mausoleum?
Oh, we know what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
Looking for parts.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so Phantasm at the drive-in, but you remember horror even before that. Do you remember how old you were at the drive-in?
Man, I was little. I don't remember how old I was, but I was still at that age where you could like stand up in the seat,
Okay. The reason I ask is because when you mentioned your father was carrying you at the haunted house, so I didn't know.
I don't know which came first. I'm guessing Phantasm, but I'm not sure on that. Cool thing is Phantasm was at the drive-in, which makes it even better.
Yeah.
Back when that was a thing.
I miss drive-ins.
Okay. So what else do you remember from that age?
Just leaning in toward horror related things, like when it would be cartoons, I'd want the Scooby-Doo, and even on like corny television shows, it would be the Halloween episode, each year, stuff like that. It was just like the most like magical holiday for me. And I remember my whole family would end up at my house on Halloween, and we'd watch movies all night. I'd do a big old trick-or-treating session back when the neighborhood used to be like just packed with us kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a really cool time. I just always loved it.
Did you have a favorite costume?
I don't remember if I did. I remember that like when I first saw Halloween, Michael Myers was like my jam. and that sort of just never went away. Just like, just that character was just perfect.
Okay.
He is iconic. Now we're talking about William Shatner, Michael Myers, not kid in a clown suit, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Clowns never did anything for me. Still don't. I just don't find them scary. I don't, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Me either. I mean, certain ones like Pennywise can be creepy. It is possible for clowns to be creepy, but yeah, I also don't really get the whole clownophobia thing.
The problem with Pennywise is like, he's just ineffective. Like, this dude's supposed to be this big, like, cosmic space spider, but he's like in the room with like a handful of 8-year-olds and he kills none of them.
Well, yeah, he's gotta make them tasty and afraid first, and then also still fail to kill them.
And still fail. It's like, I don't know, put anybody in that room with one hand tied behind their back, blindfolded with a hammer, and I feel like they'd at least get one of them.
Yeah.
Just this clown is, eventually I feel like the kids will be like, hey guys, every time we run into this asshole, it's just nothing. And that's what I just don't get about it. Is like, I just don't find him scary. He's like
one of the kids just pulls out a piece and he's like, blam. All right, it's
It's
done.
like-
Can we get a milkshake or something?
It's like, yeah, it's like, dude, are you going to kill us or not? This is boring. Like, just the most ineffective movie creature I've ever seen.
That could make for a good skit, like a comedy skit of, Pennywise picks the wrong kid. He finds the kid who's actually a horror fan.
Yeah, exactly. The kid's like, is that it?
Right? Like he looks to
That's
his
all you
friends
got?
afterwards, like, it's a fucking clown, you guys.
Like, yeah, like I get it. He's making faces. Ooh. It's like, oh no, Slipknot's doing a concert at my house. Like,
That would even be slightly scarier.
Yeah, could be. So you mentioned your family was pretty easygoing. Was there anybody in your family who was a horror fan at that
oh
time?
man, yeah. Like on my mom's side, like my grandma, my aunts, they were all into it. Not like
Cool.
I eventually got into it, like on this level, but they loved a good scary movie. And I remember back in the day, one of the big thrills about like my aunts lived out in the country. So a lot of times I could, if I wanted to, I could go stay with my cousin out in the country on the weekends, which was awesome, get to roam the woods and stuff. But they had a Betamax player. And there was this one shop that rented Betamax tapes, and that meant I could get the horror movies that I couldn't rent on VHS on Betamax and watch them down there. Just amazing. But when we first started renting VCRs, it was those big top loading monsters, and you would rent the VCR itself because we didn't have much money, and you'd rent the VCR itself, and they'd have like a weekend deal, like the VCR and 3 movies or 4 movies for the whole weekend for one price. And there was this one little closet sized room where they had the horror movies stacked up in those, those beautiful old 80s VHS boxes. And I just rented A to Z. I didn't care. I just had to see every bit of it. So
cool. I'm trying to think. I'm wondering if having the grandma and the aunts maybe influenced you at some early age.
Yeah, like was there? You said earlier it seemed to be in your DNA, but I mean, was there maybe a birth moment, if you will, of your interest in horror by influenced by a family member, or does it just seem like you were just always into it?
To me, it seems like I was always into it. I don't remember this one moment where it was like click, where a light switch went on.
That's what I was just going to say. You were probably so young that you don't even remember it if there was something like that.
Exactly. But I think that it makes a lot of sense that if there are people you love who are also enthusiastic about something that you already have an interest in, that it's going to pull you in that direction.
Well, I mean, even before you were interested, like maybe you were being babysat by your grandmother or your aunts or something, and they put on something that they wanted to see, and you didn't even know what it was, but you saw that they were liking it, so maybe you liked it. You know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing.
Anything is possible. I don't remember a moment, but I mean, I could totally see that, being down at my grandma's or something while my folks were working, and I don't know, maybe they had something on and they were having a lot of fun watching it. That would make a lot of sense. But I don't have a specific.
Yeah, we've bumped into stuff like that before where if it's that young that you can't even remember it, there's nothing you can do about that. It's just back there. So I'm wondering, did you ever find it scary at all? Or was it always entertainment to you?
Oh, it was scary as hell. Like I remember being little and I'd watch something and I ended up having to sleep in my parents' room. But there was still this feeling of safety associated with it. You know what I mean? It was never like true fear, even though I was scared. But yeah, films definitely could freak me right the hell out when I was a kid. I still like that image in Phantasm, like when the finger gets cut off in the door and it's like oozing yellow, and then it's a bug all of a sudden. It's like that sort of thing sticks.
Yeah, not normal.
No, I've never lost a finger, but I'm guessing that's not the way it, that things
They're not
happen.
usually supposed to be filled with mustard.
I wouldn't think so either. And I would, if any part of me, like if I clipped my nails and suddenly the clippings were bugs, that would make me uncomfortable.
Let's see. Did you have any scary dreams, like repeating, reoccurring dreams when you were a kid?
I did. I would have, and I recall, I don't remember my dreams much anymore. They don't stick with me anymore, but I do remember having like this one extended like week of night after night, this one werewolf dream. It had to do with these werewolves being said to be loose in my neighborhood, and there being these coins that people would lay in front of your door if they thought you were going to be like a victim.
Okay.
And it would pick up where I left off, for several nights in a row. I remember that one. It was very, very scary because I never actually saw anything in it. It was a slow burn, that one always stuck with me. And I do remember when I was really little once having a nightmare, and I woke up and I stumbled out of bed. I was like, I got to go to my folks' room. I'm freaked the fuck out, whatever. I was just dreaming. And I walked to where it was in the dark, and I walked to where I thought my door was, and I hit a wall. And I immediately my brain was like, oh no, they've shifted my reality, or I'm somewhere else. And that was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Panic.
Oh, and you know what also used to get me as a kid was, I don't know if you guys remember that little children's thing, that bloody fingers on the first step, bloody fingers on the second. That thing freaked the fuck out of me when I was a kid.
I don't know what
Not
that
ringing
is.
a bell, no.
No? Oh, man. I wonder if that's like a thing or not. Or something one of my friends came up with. I want
Is
to
it like
look
don't
it up.
step on a crack kind of thing? So like when you're going up steps, it's bloody fingers on the first step?
I don't think so. I think it was more of a like anticipation of when the story was going to go. They got you. One of those like campfire sort of waiting for the jump scare.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think it was more that sort of deal.
So what was the thing about the first step and second step stuff? Where did
I
that
think
come
it was just they're creeping toward you.
Oh,
Like now they're on the third step. Now they're on the fourth, and they're coming up the steps at you, and they're like these disembodied fingers or whatever. It just Now I think I would welcome them. Who can't use who couldn't use extra fingers? You just get older and more mature, and you can deal with these bloody fingers aside from the mess.
I mean, so many times at work, I've just been sitting here typing like, God, if I could only have 12 fingers, like,
Yeah.
just done in half the time.
Fuck, I would put up with a little blood.
Yeah.
Help get this paper out earlier. So
you're right.
That's how fingers work, right? You can just sew extra fingers on your hand and they start working.
I'm 100% positive that that's scientifically accurate.
Asking for a
Like-
friend who definitely has not robbed graves. So,
You just got to sew them on with dental floss, and they will takes about 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden they wire into your brain. You control them.
uh-huh.
I recommend everyone tries it.
Yes, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, going back to the werewolves in the neighborhood thing, you mentioned that it went on for a couple nights. What else do you remember?
Not a lot. I just remember parts of it where I'm like somewhere else in the neighborhood, and I realize that it's like later than I had initially thought, and I need to get back to the house.
Okay.
Like
One of those
in a
scenarios.
big hurry. And so I'm roaming back home. And like I said, the coins being laid on the doorsteps played in heavily. And there was something with like seeing newspaper articles and stuff like that about, the deaths around town and things like that. But I never saw a creature. I would see like shadows moving and have to get in the door, stuff like that. But it was all
So
about
more of a suspense
anticipation.
dream.
Totally,
Yes.
yeah. But I never actually had like a confrontation in the dream that I recall.
Did anything happen in your childhood, like in real life, that actually terrified you?
So I want to preface this by saying I do not believe in ghosts or anything like that. Much as I want them to be real, I don't believe in anything supernatural at all. But I want all of it to exist. So
it would be cool if it was real.
oh man, like I want to cut across the country staying in like, murder houses and supposedly haunted houses. Like I want to do that. Like I would love to have that experience, even if I'm terrified. But did have, I guess it was a nightmare. I don't recall this so well, but I was staying down at my grandma's way out in the country, one weekend when I was a kid. And when my parents and my mom came to pick me up, they said I was under the kitchen table, like hiding back there. And they came in, they're like, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on?" And I said that a figure, like a black cloaked figure, hovered into the house and didn't have any eyeballs, but it was like watching me with black pits. And so I had gotten under the kitchen table to hide.
Okay.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah, right.
I mean, now I just call that Tuesday, but
Yeah,
Well, his name's Frank.
Yeah. Guys
He's
are
got
dicks,
crazy
always
imagination.
coming in wanting to borrow money,
Let's see. Okay, but nothing that triggered any lasting fears or change behaviors.
No, nothing specific that I can think of like that.
Okay. All right. So at least for the childhood section, childhood definitely did make you happy. Moving into teenage years, what were some of your favorite or most impactful scary stuff that you were exposed to in your teenage years?
So I'm trying to think, because everything gets blurry at that point, because by the time I was a teenager, I was full blown, just horror fanatic. Those are the movies I loved. I loved Star Wars like anybody else growing up, but horror was fascinating to me where the others were fun. But I do remember, getting into that time where I loved gore films. Just found that amazing. And like I said, I got into Trauma, the sort of goofy, wacky stuff.
Okay.
Because that stuff was really fun to watch with my friends. But I remember Pumpkinhead hitting me really hard as far as more of a, early, I guess you'd call that maybe folk horror. But once again, I liked how stark and serious that one was. I remember really liking Pumpkinhead. I would watch an endless slew of those slashers and of course, and I got into the, that's when I started getting into a lot of the Italian horror. Fascinated with Suspiria and the Beyond, zombie, that sort of stuff, and the Italians and all their orange blood. I remember one called what's it called? Nightmare City or something like that. And I remember me and my cousin, we were probably, I don't know, 11, 12, something like that. But we were watching it, and these zombies, they're just running, and they're dudes that look like their faces are covered in oatmeal. And and they're overtaking the city because this plane landed full of them. But I remember they broke into this, I don't know if you remember, but they would always have these sexy woman dance routines in these movies that they would shoehorn in somewhere. And this one had an aerobics class. And these zombies busted in and they tore this woman's shirt off and bit her nipple off. And we thought that was so funny at the time. And it looked so bad, that was a rewind moment for us. But and of course the blade.
You were watching it for the zombies, right?
Yeah,
100%. Young boys watching, yes, zombies, and of course the head chopping scene in Dawn of the Dead with the helicopter blade. How many times can you watch that as a kid? I mean, it's unlimited.
Tape breaking amount of times.
Yes, exactly. Where that part of the tape gets a little stretched.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. Pumpkinhead, slashers, Italian horror.
Out of curiosity, with the Trauma, how did you come across that? Because that's always an interesting story. You're almost never old enough to get it at the video store, so it's either a corrupting older sibling or a corrupting older friend.
It was me renting A to Z in the horror section.
Oh yeah, that thing. Okay, and they let you go home with Trauma stuff, huh?
Yeah, well, my dad was always the one doing the renting, I was in there with him, and my dad was fucking rad. He's a great guy, and he knew what I was mature enough to handle, and that I was fine. I remember when we went to see when Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 showed up at the theater here. And I remember going to the box office with my dad. I was like freaking excited, just like freaking excited about this
that
thing.
one was a fun movie, you know. It was a good.
Well, they
fun
did
concept.
the Evil Dead thing. The second one's wacky, you know.
Yeah.
Like I remember us being at the thing, and they're like, "Oh, you know, I'm sorry he can't come in. He's too young for this." And my dad's like, "Oh, it's fine. I'll be with him." You know, but we're good. And they're like, "No, you know, this movie is really restricted. We're just not letting any kids in."
Not even
I'm
parental
like, this-
guidance. What?
Yeah, they're like, "Nah, you know, he's not coming in." And my dad, I remember this went on for a few minutes, and my dad eventually goes, "He has seen much worse at home." And eventually he got me in, and I don't know if I ever loved that man more. But
Like that could be taken two ways.
yeah, exactly.
Let's watch
yeah, right.
movies. I'm talking movies. Jesus.
Right?
Yeah. If you saw what we did to the neighbors, they tasted great.
Actually, you can see what we did to the neighbors. I got part of them in a bag right here. You want to see it?
Right?
Yeah. But he got me in. He got me in to see heavy metal, which not horror, but you know, a lot of horror elements there.
Mhm.
When I was really little.
Also tits.
Yeah.
Of course, but they're like cartoon boobs. I
Yeah,
don't know
that
if that
doesn't
counts.
How old were you when you saw Texas Chainsaw?
Texas Chainsaw, the first one, I must have been really young because I saw the second one. What year did the second one come out? I saw it when it was like in the theater. So
Like
same with
mid-80s,
Evil Dead 2. I don't want to click my mouse to look it up. I've already been scolded by a couple assholes once.
Oh, doing nothing wrong with doing it intentionally. It was just a click, 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 click. Habitual.
Where's my click pen?
I have a problem.
We mentioned fidget toys. I'm thinking. I mean, the original I thought came out in the late 70s, but maybe early 80s.
Yeah, I looked it up. Number 2 came out in 86.
Okay, so
Oh,
I would have
really?
been like
86?
12 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, they did not want me in there.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, 12 does seem for most 12-year-olds, they probably would be a little young.
Maybe so. It was always funny to me because like my house was the place my friends knew if they wanted to watch really scary movies, they could go over and watch them. You know,
Right? You were that kid.
I was that kid. Yes.
Then you got this friend over here that's got the porn stuff because their father's got the Playboys. You got Andy with the horror stuff. So you mentioned other kids. Was there anybody else in your friends group that was also a horror fan, or was it just you were the big guy?
By the time I hit middle school, I had a friend named Ricky, and he was like, you know, we had our guys. Like I was a Michael Myers guy, he was a Freddy Krueger guy, you know, and he was big into horror. Not as I never had a friend growing up that was like as nuts about it as me, but I had friends that were very into it, and that was so much fun. You know, so much fun. Like something new would come out and having that shared like excitement, like that was just awesome.
Exactly. That's why we're going to bring it up, because they're having the social element can definitely add enjoyment to the situation.
Absolutely. I mean, even now, because I'm such an art house piece of crap now, where like when I see reviews up for a new movie and they're like, it's slow and pretentious, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see this. Like I'm that asshole.
Yeah, I can relate. I'm the asshole that brought all my friends to Ari Aster films, and at the end they're like, why were there a bunch of fucking naked people in a shed? I hated
You're
this
like,
movie.
shut up. Yeah, like last year, I think my two favorites were Saint Maud and Censor.
Oh, Saint Maud, that ending. Yes.
Yes. Did you see
Same-
Censor yet?
And same thing with Censored. Actually, they kind of both ended on
They
the
are
same
very
angle.
parallel
Like the
films.
delusions of reality and what's actually like the quick
Yes.
flashes of this is what's actually happening right now. It's not happy.
And man, I don't know if you got it, man, but I got to plug Vinegar Syndrome. Their Blu-ray of Censor that came out is freaking beautiful.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Like the box it comes in, the packaging is so just, there's so much care put into this thing. It is beautiful. Comes with like a hard cardboard slip cover. I love that stuff. I buy I don't collect anything anymore. I used to be a big comics and toys collector, but I've been selling all that stuff off. But now I do collect horror Blu-ray and 4K stuff because, for one, I think with the digital age coming, things are going to disappear. You know, like even if, say, like a movie like Stigmata, where the alternate ending is far superior to the theatrical. Mm-hmm. But when you go to buy it on iTunes or something like that, that other ending is gone.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff like that. And I also worry about them going back in and cutting out scenes that they find
Lucasing.
Yes, exactly. I worry about that with my horror. And so I do buy these movies. I want them in their like purest form.
Did you participate in Halloween as a teenager?
So as a kid, trick-or-treating was everything. Like, you know, to the point of like, forget those little pumpkins. We would move around with pillowcases.
Yep.
We'd have so much candy. It was so much fun. And as I got older, like even when I was in high school, me and my friend Brom, my last couple of years of high school, we would do up the front yard like crazy. We'd even go buy like dry ice, cover the yard so we could like have this mist rising. I remember one year we bought like this pumpkin that was white, and it was so big that once we had carved it out, you could get in it and close the lid. So we had that lit up, and it looked awesome. He was an artist and just amazing with like, you know, like anything I carved next to what he carved looked like a pile of crap. But and then on top of that, we went and got like 20 little pumpkins, so the lawn was like covered. And then we did the gag where, like, you know, I'm sitting there in a chair on the porch, but I've got stuffing coming out of like the neck and the sleeves, that sort of thing. Yeah, but I had a hockey mask on with dark sunglasses under it, so there's no, you know, nothing, no giveaways showing.
Yep.
And so when the kids would come up, I would pop up and scare them, and when they'd run away, Brom, he'd be hiding in the back of my dad's pickup by the road, and he'd pop up there as they were running away, and it was just the best. Our only rule was we didn't scare little kids, you know.
Well, that's nice of you.
Yeah, you know. I don't want to scar anyone because of these two assholes.
Well,
not yet.
Did you have any recurring dreams in your teenage years?
Nothing that sticks out.
Okay.
Yeah. That werewolf dream might have been when I was a teenager. I don't know.
Did you have anything actually terrifying happen in your real life?
I don't think so. I had when I was in middle school, a friend of mine committed suicide, and I had a friend in 5th grade who attempted suicide, didn't succeed, and then, like I said, in middle school, someone succeeded at committing suicide, and that was a moment, you know, like that was this very like I don't even know how to describe it, but it altered the world for me.
How so?
I like that was a possibility, you know. It's like, I will, like, in that same vein, where these things that I've been enjoying on film, when they start to like cross the line into like, these people that are making these films and this art, they are basing it on the horror of real life, you know, kind of coming out of childhood. And I do remember there was, when I was a kid, there was a girl that was murdered here in Charlottesville. And I remember the girl's name to this day. It was Katie Worski. And this guy had, like, you know, kidnapped her and killed her, and they never found her body, but they said that she might either be buried under this Hardee's that had been being built at the time. I remember that was one of the big rumors, that she was down in the foundation, or that she'd ended up at the like at the landfill or something like that. But that was once again very eye opening. That these monsters were also in the real world. It's like you knew it on one level, but it hadn't been that close to home. We didn't have the internet, so murder stories came from a distance and they came late.
Mm.
It had to be something really sensational, like a Charles Manson sort of thing to reach you. But by the time you heard about Charles Manson, it was like a myth almost by then.
Right.
So it was so big. But this was this little personal murder, and
It was more close to home.
very close to home. I mean, they lived down the street from my grandma's house.
So how did that approach or change your approach with horror?
It didn't, but I think it made me more thoughtful about it. A little more thoughtful about the world in general.
Okay. Let me jump back up to hear some of the media things that you talked about, like Pumpkinhead and the Italian horrors and the slashers. I like to try to focus on the emotional reactions, because that sometimes tells us something. What do you think your prime emotional reactions were to these things?
I think for me, it was, I remember like when something new would show up at the shop, and once again, those 80s horror films, like the box art always made promises that the movie couldn't keep.
Right.
Like the art was it was these gorgeous, like cool, creepy paintings, and especially those big clamshell boxes. So it was this feeling of like wonder is the best way. The same way I imagine some kids feel when they first show up at Disney.
Okay.
Like that sort of feeling where it's like, and I still get that when I see a trailer of something new come out. Like I get that same like, oh my God, I need this in my life immediately. This sort of like, it's magical. It's here's this piece of art coming at me, and I've always got that little bit of hope. And I remember feeling this when I was a kid too, because I love a lot of horror movies, but they're like those 10, 15 maybe films that just hit every note and they're perfect to me. Something like the French original version of Martyrs,
Mm-hmm.
where I saw it and I couldn't even speak at the end of it. And so I've always got that sort of like when I see a trailer of something and I'm like, oh my God, that's the tone. That's what I want. Like, and it's like scratching a lottery ticket, like, is this going to do it? And it's funny because sometimes I find that I don't enjoy a film that I really love as much on the first viewing, because the whole time I'm watching it, as I love it more and more and more, I start getting internally grumpy because I'm thinking, I know this director is going to screw up the ending. And so I start anticipating them messing up this thing I love, and when they hit that landing and they nail it, then I'm immediately like, and Censor was one of those for me where I went back and saw it 3 days in a row. Like after they nailed the landing, I was like, oh yes, like they didn't screw up. There's not a big CG monster at the end, like things like that, but like let the right one in, something like that, where I feel like just it's just beautiful and perfect, and it's just this piece of art.
Well, you mentioned hope, and I was going to ask, what are you hoping for? But then you mentioned tone, so I think it's related to that. What's the tone you're looking for?
I don't really enjoy horror comedy, and I also don't like generic tropes that are fine when you're a kid, when you haven't been exposed to them, But as you get older and you've seen them a million times, like, oh, the bad thing brought the son and father closer together and they didn't like each other before.
Right.
That sort of thing feels trite to me now.
Right.
When I see a director do it and like, oh, that made the family love each other again. It's like that sort of thing. It feels very cheap to me.
Yeah.
No humor, no tropes. But those are negatives. What's the positives? What are you seeking?
So I love things that don't have safety. Like, I like when a director lets me know nothing here is sacred. Not a character, not a relationship. There is no promise being made to you as to where this thing is gonna go, as to where this thing is gonna end. One of the things I really love right now, because I'm into this sort of thing, are horror adjacent movies, like A Ghost Story, which not exactly a horror movie. It's kind of a love story, but it's a ghost. But I think it's like absolutely beautiful. Or stuff like I don't know if you saw Stoker. Stoker was brilliant. Or more recently, what was it called? The guy that did The Lobster.
Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yeah.
That sort of horror adjacent story where it's like, we don't know what genre this is, but we're the only one that's going to let you in. So come on and hang out, you know? That sort of thing I love. And I love movies where no one in the story is a good person. And that's one of the things I loved about Stoker.
Another one in that same vein would be We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Oh, so good. Yes.
Not necessarily a horror story, but fucked up and fucked up people.
And nobody that you can say is like, that's my hero. I don't like hero characters because I don't think they exist in real life. I think there are people that do heroic things, but I think we're all damaged.
So it sounds like what you like is basically at its base, just something different, not the same normal cookie cutter Lego, these characters are going to die, these characters are going to fall in love. Something different.
Exactly, yeah. Definitely.
It still goes back to the suspense. I mean, we're talking about the unknown, but it's the suspense, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
you can't have suspense if you know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
Very true. And other recent things I'm thinking of that are in this vein are Melancholia and Mother. Oh, you haven't seen Melancholia?
No.
It's wonderful.
I've seen that, but I've seen Mother.
Mother I saw so many times in the theater and not once, I think once maybe, but almost every time I went, people left.
Well, yeah, I mean, the baby. People probably walked out at that part.
Yeah, people are so anti-eating babies nowadays. It's like...
I was like 13 when I found that image online of the Asian dude eating a baby out of a soup bowl. I mean... You just gotta expose yourself to it early, and then you rip off the Band-Aid, and it's fine.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, did you see The Eyes of My Mother?
Yes. Oh,
like that sort of thing is like, that is my jam, you know? And like I said, I think it's a horror movie.
In The Eyes of My Mother? I would count that as a horror movie, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to fit anywhere else.
It was similar to American Mary in that you just have this, like, deranged, fucked up woman who has to hurt someone because it's her thing.
But the thing I loved about this over American Mary is The Eyes of My Mother. She didn't mean to hurt anyone.
Yeah, I was just about to say they're not really
She
the
was
same thing.
dealing
American
with
Mary
her-
was definitely revenge. This was her just kind of carrying on a tradition that she inherited from her mother, I think.
Well, and it was her like dealing with her pain and loneliness.
Yeah.
And having no idea how to go about that in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And this is a big sticking point for me with Chainsaw Massacre sequels. Is one of the things I love about Leatherface in the original one that they have gotten wrong in every sequel is that they make him evil in the sequels.
Yep.
And sadistic. And in the original Chainsaw Massacre, he is working. He's the scared, I need to do this. Like, he's not enjoying hurting anyone. He is putting food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And they make him evil. They even make the masks like look mad in later films.
Mm-hmm.
And like that makes him less scary. Like that he knows what he's doing and he's going to get you. And it's like, it's so much less scary to me than the chaos he presents in the first one.
Right.
That sort of apathy to the entire situation other than I have to get dinner on the table.
So we've talked now about a number of things that I think would fall into your adult years. Everything from when you mentioned Saint Maud to, French version of Martyrs and Let the Right One In. I'm guessing all that stuff is adult years by now.
Yes. Yeah.
Same hoping for the same tone.
Yeah. I love, like my ideal film, like I would say like something like The Witch. I love when an author or a director, I should say, is in no rush to get where he's going. Mm-hmm. Like, he's going to sit you down in this atmosphere and make you soak it up for a while. The movie's going to be longer. It's going to be dark. I cannot abide comic relief characters. Like, I don't want any snarf in my damn horror,
But
that's a great way of putting it. Oh my God.
Yeah, even in, I can deal with a character who the person is funny and they're in this situation that isn't funny, kind of like in Midsummer, the one dude had a sense of humor. He was kind of a goofy guy.
Yeah, he pissed on the tree.
Red-haired. Yeah, but there are people like that in real life. I can deal with that, but the guy that's there, like, to be wacky or to trip and fall down, like,
it wasn't that guy didn't seem like he was shoehorned in. That was just the guy. Yeah,
like I'm that guy. Like if I was in a horror movie, like I'm a goofy son of a bitch. Like I goof off constantly. I'm always looking for the joke. And I'm really annoying that way. And
fiddling with the thing you should be fiddling with.
Fiddling with the thing, though we don't know for sure that was me. It's not been confirmed officially.
And then the natives are like, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "What? What are you talking? What?"
It's like, shit. You invited me.
Yeah, right.
I'll fiddle all I
want. You mentioned towards the end of a movie not being able to speak at the end. You'd also talked, this suspense of the unknown, but then I think kind of the not being able to speak at the end maybe is something slightly different.
I mean, that's just being speechless at the end of.
It is when something hits me like that deeply, like it's an experience for me. Like when I saw The Witch, that was like, I just wanted to sit there and soak that in, like, because you don't get those, and especially I love ghost stories so much, like the original Changeling, The Others, stuff like that, where it's just tone the entire movie and slow scares, and I love that sort of thing. But they're so hard to make because, like, I think the easiest type of film would be like a kind of the modern jump scare horror, because you don't need to work real hard for that. You just need to slow it down for a minute and go, "Buh," and then slow it down and "Buh." Like, I remember I saw that movie, The Nun, and it was another, like, I felt the same way about that I did with It, where I'm like, she's just not doing anything. Like, everybody in the family's fine. Don't worry about it. She jumps out, but then she doesn't grab them. She doesn't kill them. And it's like, why is she bothering? She's like an annoying neighbor more than a scary presence. Like,
she killed the dog too.
Dun dun dun. Man, that dude, like, I like those movies are a little tough for me because of how corny the families always are. They always have these speeches about how they, like, "I loved you since the first time I saw you, baby. You always been there for me." And I'm sitting there like with a little bit of vomit in my Coke.
Yeah.
They're so unrealistic, like the family dynamics in those films.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty painful, but I like the first. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, let's go back to The Witch for a second. What was it? You said that was one of the ones where you couldn't speak at the end. What was it that left you speechless?
The fact that it never betrayed itself. It never jumped out of its tone to have this like there's no like horse chase at the end, and there's no battle between good and evil or explosion or anything else. It just sank into its tone and it stayed true to what it was, and it didn't ever pander to what it thought an audience might want.
But see, all that sounds like
vision.
But that all sounds like it's meta commentary about the movie, not the content. Do you know what I mean?
Let me think. Well, I mean, it just didn't miss a note. Like beginning to end, I never had that moment where I was taken out of the story and reminded I was watching a movie. You know, I never had that moment where someone said something and I'm like, did they just do that for laughs? I just sank in and I stayed there. And at the end, I thought the girl's journey was like just absolutely beautiful. And when she's up in the air, like you know, the direction was so good. You feel like you're up there with her. Like you've escaped all of this like oppressive pain. And like, I don't know, it was beautiful.
What did you think was beautiful about her journey?
Just I think it was that you suffer with her for the entire film, and you see her wanting to escape this life and this cruel sort of mother figure, and she can't get away and can't get away and can't get away, and eventually
she does. It's like an unexpected happy ending. You expect it to go the cookie cutter route of, and she didn't actually succeed, or and somehow the baby got back and the witches were thwarted and happy ending. Everyone's happy, but no, she actually became a witch.
Yeah, and the other thing I could have seen happening would be a Carrie sort of ending, where she goes back and destroys everything, you know.
But they didn't. They left it open, which was classy.
Absolutely, and I don't think those people would matter to that character anymore.
True.
Fuck yeah. No more reason for rage, no more reason for sorrow. She is like unshackled, you know?
So I'm hearing possibly conflicting things here, but are you saying that she eventually did escape? And you say by becoming a witch, so was it like she escaped by going through it, like becoming the thing she feared?
I don't know if I'd put it that way or not, but I think, yeah, there's got to be some element of that. I mean, she was...
I mean, how else was it an escape?
Well, it's an escape because once she knows she's this powerful, I mean, what are these people going to do to drag her back in? She's like, bitch, I'm flying now. Like, you think I'm going to wash the dishes? You're crazy. Like, you know, she is physically elevated herself beyond that world. She is somewhere else now, a place with new rules, you know?
So she escaped into her power, but not by going back and joining them, but taking that and then leaving.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's a reason that she didn't go back to that house. You know, there's no need. It's behind her. Like at that point, revenge is petty and pointless. She's new, you know, she's reborn and kind of what she's needed to be. I don't know if you saw a movie called The Reflecting Skin. No. It's an early like Viggo Mortensen film, and it's freaking gorgeous, but it has an end that has a sort of release like that I love. It's different. So there's no spoiler there, but it's one of my very favorite movies. And it did finally got a Blu-ray release like a couple years ago.
You mentioned one other movie that left you speechless at the end, but I wasn't able to write it down fast enough. Do you remember what that one was?
Was it a ghost story?
I think it was Martyrs.
Maybe. Oh, Martyrs is just... Martyrs is freaking perfect. The whole like French extremity genre, like the films of like Gaspar Noé. He's just, I just think the guy's like, his work is brilliant.
Well, let's talk about Martyrs then for a second. When we were talking about The Witch, the things that I kind of keyed into, you were talking about no suspension of disbelief. And I was going to point out that, okay, so if there's no suspension of disbelief, then it left you thinking about whatever it was in the movie. What was it in the Martyrs that you were left thinking about?
So Martyrs, I don't like. You guys have seen it, right?
Yeah,
I think Chris has. I have not.
both,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Well, the ending is the most existential mind fuck I think there's ever been in a film.
It's a little nihilist too. I mean, depending on how you interpret what she said, if it means nothing, then that's total
Yes.
nihilist. But
I think it's one of the most nihilistic films ever made. And I love that the film has it has this midsection where suddenly the tone shifts and you got a second story that you did not see coming.
And maybe that's kind of what starts the snowball effect, if you will, of that feeling of awe at the end of it, because it throws you that curveball in the middle of the film where you go from one character being the main character to now this new person, and the story starts all over with the torturing and the need to escape. So yeah, it starts that escalating process, and by the end it ends and you're just left there like, well, all of that just happened. Shit.
Yes. And the ending is one of my favorite movie endings of all time. Like I absolutely love it because in this one, in a way, the victim sort of wins, but sort of everybody loses.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and I think it's so beautifully shot.
So here it sounds like, earlier when we were talking, it was more about maybe thrill or excitement or suspense. Here now it sounds like it's not just the suspense, but also an interesting story, I guess.
Of course. Yeah, I think that is key. I think
your tastes may have matured.
That's the thing, and it's sometimes it's a bummer. Like sometimes I miss being able to sit down with Friday the 13th and enjoy it the way I did when I was, 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
Has there been anything actually terrifying that's happened in your adult life?
I've been through some dark times, but not a
like a near-death experience or anything.
Not a near-death experience, no.
Nothing that has affected your life moving forward. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Nothing. Well, I mean, I've definitely had suicidal ideation, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But I've gotten through it, and
being the operative word. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be most of it. I've struggled with this whole life mattering thing for most of my life since I was a kid. I see people with religion and people with whatever else, and sometimes I have to I have to really question everything. I don't get it sometimes, and I don't even know how to put it exactly, but it all seems very goofy and pointless to me a lot of the time. And watching horror movies makes me happy, I don't know how those two tie together, but I know that that's when I feel good. One of the times I feel good is when I'm watching something from any genre in horror,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've definitely battled with that as an adult. And, I know a ton of people who have too. I'm not saying I'm special or anything, but
just answering the question honestly, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess let's jump down here to the last questions. These questions don't just relate to horror, and they don't relate to any particular section of your life. It's all over. And the first two questions I'm going to ask, I'm going to give them to you at the same time because it could be the same answer for both, or it could be two different answers. Those two questions are: what do you think is your favorite movie, and what movie have you seen more times than any other?
Right now, it's either Martyrs or A Ghost Story, probably.
Well, we've already talked about Martyrs, so let's go with Ghost Story. What makes that your favorite movie?
So A Ghost Story is it's a David Lowery film. It's not a horror movie, but it's basically this couple is in love. They're living in their house, and the husband dies in an accident. Basically, he's in the house as she is wandering through the rest of her life, meeting lovers, and then you think that's kind of how it's going to go. But then the film goes beyond her even being alive anymore. She's out of the picture, and he's still occupying this space. And eventually, this space is like no longer a house; it's a big, like, futuristic office building sort of thing. And he's still walking around with no purpose and no concept of time. There's these great interviews with the director about, like, there's a scene where and it's like 9 minutes long, and the Rooney Mara is the wife, and Casey Affleck is the ghost. And there's a scene after he dies where someone brings her a pie, like, you know, people bring food after a death and stuff like that. And the scene is like 8 or 9 minutes long, and she just eats the entire pie, and you just sit there and watch her do it. And then she goes and throws it up. And I saw, like, I've heard people, like, make fun of the scene. I've heard people like me where I'm like, I thought it was brilliant. Like, you have to sit there with her in her pain. Like, you don't get to go anywhere else because she's hurting, and you're going to be here with her, so you feel it. And that's what I thought the director was doing. But what he was actually doing, according to him in this interview, is he said that he wanted you to understand how time moved for this ghost. So there are scenes where things take too long. Yeah. And there are scenes where things fly by, and all of a sudden he's lost 50 years and he's in the future. And it's like things they're linear still for him, but they're not moving the way it does for the living.
So we're talking about moments in the film, but what's the emotional reaction for you?
Like, heartbroken, fascinated, this overwhelming sense of, like, seeing the most beautiful painting I've ever seen. There's my favorite scene in the movie is the ghost walks up to the window and looks across at the house across the way, and another person in a sheet is standing there. And there's no dialogue with the ghost, but there's subtitles. Yeah. And he waves and the other one waves, and his subtitles say, like, "What are you doing?" And the other ghost says, "I'm waiting for someone." And he says, "Who are you waiting for?" And the other ghost says, "I don't remember." And that is, like, everything to me. Like, wow. That is beauty on, like, level 500 for me. Like, that is heartbreaking, beautiful, perfect. Just, like, I don't know. That resonates with me so hard. And I can't describe it, but it brings tears to my eyes every time I see it, without fail. Like, that breaks my heart. And maybe it ties back into me, like, my, like, feeling that there's no purpose to any of this, and this sort of, like, beautiful sadness that this thing is still waiting even after it doesn't know what it's waiting for.
Possibly tangential, but do you have strong emotions about memory or the fear of loss of memory?
I think that I have trouble realizing that, like, that things that are gone, like that moments are gone. And even as a kid, I kind of, if I was, like, at the beach with my parents, which every year we'd take this vacation down to Virginia Beach, and it was one of my very favorite things. But as soon as we got there, I was already mourning that it was going to be over. And I've always had that thing where I was already, like, enjoying myself and happy, but already sad because I knew the end was on the way. And that is a theme in my music, like, a lot. Like, I write about that. I probe that sore tooth a lot, you know, and I don't know why that's always been a thing with me, but it really has. It's
the reason that I asked that question is because I think you and I might have something in common here.
Yeah.
And this, I think, has come up on at least one other call. Chris, you might recall me talking about this, but ever since I was a child, I've always had a sense of depression related to the impermanence of things is probably the best way I can say it. I remember being a kid and learning about like the pyramids and how old they are, and thinking to myself about how, you know, how powerful the people were that had those built. And those are probably the only people from their time that we remember. And you think about, like, there's probably millions of people on the planet, and we only remember them because of these stupid, huge rocks that they assembled. And like, we don't know any of the people that put them together. We don't know who now 20 years later, there's been enough Egyptology, science so we do know who built them now. But like at the time when I was learning about them, like, you didn't even know who the name of the architect was. Like, who's the contractor that built them?
And I totally feel that. And for me, it's also this thing, like, I'll see, in a photo from like 1900 and like,
well, that's what I was going to say is that's where it started for me, but then it grew from there into touching everything and including my own mortality. Like, I understand that 10,000 years from now, nobody's going to know who I am.
No.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's almost comforting in a way, right? No pressure.
right.
Easy
totally.
for you to say.
But I think the thing that, like, and I don't even exactly know how to put this into words, but like the other thing that, like, is I always find very heartbreaking, like, I love watching those old, like, restored videos of, like, New York City in 1900, right. and
wondering about the people in them.
Yeah. And as opposed to like the history and this guy did this and this, to me, it's like I'll just see a random person walking down the street in one of these videos and be like, man, they were going somewhere. They were hoping for something. There was somebody they loved, or somebody they hoped loved them, or a job they wanted to get, or they were about to have their favorite meal. It's just these tiny little moments. It's those like little microscopic moments that disappear, and there's no way at all to.
I think about something like that in relation to myself all the time. Like, my grandmother's house in Florida, we've lived there on and off since '85, and I can't tell you how many times I've mowed that lawn and looked at the sidewalk and said, I don't know if anybody is ever going to know this sidewalk as well as I do today. Like,
yeah.
It's weird and on some level, but
it's also beautiful on some level. Like, I love that sort of thing. And I think that when an art house horror film touches on things of that nature, that really does it for me. Because they're abstract ideas,
Yes and no. I mean, coming down to the topic of mortality, I was going to say it's concrete for me because I exist. Once I'm gone, it'll be abstract for me.
That is one way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
It'll be concrete as long as I'm concrete.
Right.
We're all carbon.
Yeah.
Do you see any common threads about what you like in horror? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
Not really. I love things for different reasons. I love Michael Myers for his stoic, quiet purpose and always marching forward, kind of this unstoppable thing is just going forward. I love demons for the chaos. I love ghosts because nothing gives me chills like that. Ghost stories, like, nothing gives me chills like that. So I'm kind of all over the place with what I love.
Well, you kind of touched on something that came up earlier in the call. We were talking about, serious horror and no humor and stuff like that. And we kind of joked about you being a purist. but I think that kind of ties into having more intense emotional reactions, which you kind of touched on here in this last bit. I forget what you said. There's something in there about intense emotions, but so I'm wondering if that's a thing for you.
Certainly, like, and scenes where like a character is, I don't know how to put this, like letting it all out. Mm-hmm. Like in Mother, when she starts screaming, the main character is a scene where she starts just screaming, like it chokes me up. And The Reflecting Skin, a movie I mentioned earlier, the end of that movie always gets me when there's like this major like release of emotion, this pent up. And I think The Witch has that to an extent at the end, when she's like letting out all this kind of pent up oppression. And you know, I don't know, that sort of thing always hits me right in the heart.
Well, that kind of ties into the next question, but you've already answered it. I was going to say, do you have any idea why it is that you like those things? But if not,
it's funny. It's I don't know. Like, it's like looking at a painting and being like, man, I think that painting is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And you could say it's the muted tones or the, you know, the way the subject is sitting. I don't know, but sometimes it just is.
Now that we've talked about that, then why horror? Because couldn't you find intense, beautiful emotions in other genres?
I have, like I said, in horror adjacent things. My problem with a lot of like, you're not going to find something like that, like in like a Transformers movie. You know, it's you're not going to feel anything. At least I'm not watching like a Transformers film or something like that. It's and you're not going to find a lot of that in movies that are, I don't know, like a lot of times if you watch like a PG movie, you can feel where it shouldn't be PG anymore. Mm-hmm. But I think horror is that genre that you find more movies that don't pander, you know, that the audience is open to something strange and unexpected and not happy.
I think what you're moving towards is kind of where I thought the answer was, which is that it's the specific emotions. Like I said a minute ago, you can find these kinds of emotions in other genres, but I think what you're saying is it's these specific emotions, though, you don't necessarily get in those other genres. Like, okay, an action film is excitement, and there's, you know, rom-coms have certain, you know, emotional content there, but it's not this emotional content. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And like I said, like, I'm trying to think if like it's interesting because I think of like indie horror as opposed to something like, you know, like a James Wan film, which is catering more toward a mainstream audience. But I think of like the horror I really love, like I said, like last year, Saint Maud, Censor, these sort of art house pieces. Like, is there that sort of audience in every genre? Like, is there like, I guess maybe Clerks would be an example for comedy, you know, where it's made for a smaller audience and it's not aimed at the masses. But I don't know. Like, but I think that's part of it. And even in other genres, I tend to lean toward the films like that, like Clerks, that aren't typical.
So I think for summary, I think I have an idea of how we could summarize this. Before I tell you what I'm thinking, I'm kind of going to go into a TMI tangent a little bit. This is an adult rated call, so we'll just do this.
Fire away.
But you know, I remember, again, I did say TMI, being a young teenager, hitting puberty and being horny as shit. And I hadn't learned yet how to have an orgasm. And I can remember one particular night where I was just like the most insanely emotionally, you know, past 10 up to 20. Like I didn't know what to do. Like it was just this load of emotion really is just
Load.
yeah. And I just didn't know what to do with it. And, when I'm looking back through my notes on what I've written down in this call about, in your case, it's a different, it's similar, but a different set of emotions. It's, the suspense and the dread of the unknown. And like you said, the end is on the way. And it's this, I don't want to say negative emotions because it's putting a judgment on it, but it's a set of emotions that you don't know what to do with. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's, like I said, a big part of it is that whole, like, passing of time and things being gone when they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's kind of like, what do these emotions do for me in this sea of nothing?
Yeah, right, yeah. In a sea of meaningless, trying to build meaning. And honestly, watching people who have invented meaning into their lives and bought into it. And that is not an insult. That's a little bit of jealousy.
Yeah, right?
Well, that's kind of what I mean. It's like disembodied emotion. It's like, what do I do with this? And it wasn't until my later 20s, early 30s and years of counseling and 12-step stuff, meetings and shit like that, that I kind of got to a point where I realized that I don't need to do anything with my emotions. I can just experience them and then let them go, or let them not go, but
let
them be.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Because, growing up, I think we're all taught that if you feel this, you must do that. If you feel that, you must do this. And it takes a long time to unlearn that, to realize, no, I don't have to do that. But then, like you say,
anything.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you're left with, okay, but then what do I do? I just sit here and feel this? It's like...
I kind of had the opposite. I was told if I feel like smashing a chair over my classmate, don't do that. So I did.
Now you're going, but I can?
Right. I really missed out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So considering the theme of the podcast, last question, is there anything relevant that you're aware of that we haven't asked about or you haven't talked about?
No, not that I can think of. Like, this has been a lot of fun. And it's interesting, like, thinking of things that I don't normally, like, think of at all. They just kind of are part of me,
Right.
Like, so.
That's part of why we enjoy it, too.
Yeah, it's a cool idea that you guys have here. Like, I dig it.
Thank you.
It's good food for thought.
Yes.
It is.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. Love to do it again sometime.
I'll get the closing here. Thank you to anybody else out there listening. Please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. Got lots of cool stuff over there, but the biggest thing you can do to help us right now is just tell a friend. If you like what we're doing, tell somebody.